Hello everyone, welcome back to another chess openings video. In today's video, I'm going to be teaching everyone how to play against the French defense as white. Before we get further on into the video, please consider smashing that like button and hitting that subscribe button to help out my channel. So, without further ado, let's get on to the video. French defense opens after the moves pawn to e4, pawn to e6, pawn to d4, and pawn to d5. There's two main ways that people go about attacking the French defense. One is by playing the main line, which is pawn to e5, and the other is by playing the exchange variation with pawn takes d5. Now, I know there are other options such as knight to c3, but I'm not going to be talking about those in the video. Anyways, let's see what happens if white pushes his pawn to e5, going after the French defense main line. Well, in this case, black attacks white's weak d4 pawn with pawn to c4, pawn to c5. White defends with pawn to c3. Black continues on attacking the d4 pawn, and white continues defending. And after a move such as queen to b6, the game could continue with moves such as pawn to a3 or bishop to e2. However, I'm not going to be talking about the French defense main line in much depth other than this, as I think there's a much easier and better way to deal with the French defense after pawn to d5, which is the exchange variation after e takes on d5. Black will recapture with their pawn with e takes d5, and then white has to continue with the move bishop to d3. Here, black will most likely play knight to f6, after which you continue on with your development with knight to f3. Here, black has two choices, one of which is bishop to d6, and the other one, which is knight to c6. If bishop to d6, you continue on the game with castles, bishop to g5, rook to e8, knight to d2, and some standard development moves such as bishop to g4, c3, knight to d7, queen to c2, h6, and bishop to e3. As you can see, in this position, white and black are actually completely equal on the board. And this is one way to go about attacking the French defense after you exchange the pawns. However, if we were to go back a couple of moves, here, you would see that knight to f3 is not necessarily your only option, and this is where the main idea in the video comes in. I recommend playing the very sharp knight to e2. And what this does is, this knight is now protecting the f4 square so that you can challenge black's bishop. You can challenge black's bishop with bishop to f4. Black continues with bishop to d6, after which white castles, black castles, and finally, white plays the bishop to f4, which the knight to e2 was all about. After this, if black is to exchange, bishop takes f4, knight takes f4, black has just given white a very powerful knight on f4, which can later be used in attack after the queen comes into the game. However, after bishop to f4, most of the times, black is not going to recapture the bishop. Instead, they're going to play a developing move, such as rook to e8, after which white has to capture on d6. Whenever black lets you eliminate their dark square bishop, you should definitely do so. Now, the reason for this is because essentially what it is black's dark square bishop on d6 is an extremely powerful piece which controls very important squares in the board and in the center. And by eliminating it with your dark square bishop, now you've traded your weaker dark square bishop for their strong dark square bishop. And now your light square bishop controls important squares in the board as well. This is the entire idea for trading off the dark square bishops with bishop to f4 and knight to e2. Anyway, the game usually continues in such a manner, with c3 protecting the d4 pawn and strengthening the center, and it also makes room for queen to c2. bishop to e6, a normal developing move, queen to c2, knight to c6, knight to d2, and the idea with this is to bring both your knights to the king side, to the king side, after which the knights can control very important squares in the center. Let's say black plays rook to d8, knight to g6, knight to e7. Now black also wants to bring his knight, to g6, knight to f6, knight to g6, and as you can see, it is a completely equal game. However, I slightly prefer white is a bit better because of his strong control of the b1 to h7 diagonal with the queen bishop battery. So this is another way that you can go about in the French defense exchange variation. Now, after knight to f6 and bishop to d6, let's say they don't go knight to f6. What if instead, after knight to f3, black plays a move such as knight to c6, attacking the d4 pawn? Well, after this, you're in luck, because every time that black does not put his bishop on d6 right away, what you have to do is play bishop to f4 yourself. Play bishop to f4 yourself, and this is in the knight to f3 line, after knight to f3. Well, now as you can see, there's no need for the knight to be on e2. Another way of going about this is, instead of playing knight to f3, you could just go bishop to f4 right away, with the same idea, not needing to play knight to e2, but rather going to f3. But let's see what happens if knight to f3, knight to c6, attacking the e4 pawn, and bishop to f4. After this, black will usually challenge your dark square bishop, and just like before, you eliminate the powerful dark square bishop and castle your king. Black castles, and then you develop your knight, you bring it into the game. So in case black ever plays bishop to g4, you have c3, let's say a move such as rook to e8, and queen to d2, unpinning the knight, as this knight also protects the knight on f3. After this, black can go for a move such as rook to d8, and here's the main idea in this line. The main idea in this line is to get one of your knights to the powerful e5 outpost, and one way of doing so is by bringing your rook over and placing your knight on e5. So first, let's get rid of this bishop with h6 or h3. Bishop takes f3, knight takes f3, and let's say black plays a move such as h6. h6. Then you move your rook to e1, challenging black's rook, and after a trade happens on the e file, all you have to do is it's black to move right now, and let's say they play a move such as a6, actually with the idea of b5 and b4, busting open white's queen side. After this, white has the idea of knight to e5, and in many exchange lines, you actually want to try to get your knight to e5, as in this position, it can't even be captured. Because if it is captured, then pawn takes e5, forks the queen and the knight. So after the queen moves, let's say a move such as queen to d7, then pawn takes knight wins the game for white. Now, that's essentially it, everybody. This is the French defense exchange variation, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Now, this opening, I know that I did not go in as much depth as my other videos. However, in the French defense, there's actually not much to go in depth about, as both sides have a very almost symmetrical position, with the knights on f3. As you can see here, the knights on f3 and f6, a similar pawn structure on the queen side, and both players castled king side. And there's nothing actually wrong with this, as it's a completely equal game. However, the French defense in general is a very equalizing game for black, and it doesn't leave both players with many chances other than the chance of a draw. So, other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode on how to best tackle the French defense. And the reason why I don't want to go into this variation in which you push e5 is because there's a lot of complications after the main line. Because black actually gets a lot of initiative trying to attack the d4 pawn, and white is stuck defending it with moves such as bishop to e3, or actually not bishop to e3, but let's say something like the best move in the position, which is a3. So this actually does not give white any or many chances at all to do much in the game, as black will constantly be hammering down on the d5 pawn. And the worst part is, you can never actually take the d5 pawn, because if you take the d5 pawn, essentially what happens is, now your e5 pawn is weak. So after, let's say, bishop takes c5 attacking the f7 square and queen to c2 defending the f7 square, this pawn is extremely weak and can be a target for black after moves such as knight to e7 to g6. This is why I do not recommend you play the line with pawn to e5 in the French defense, the main line. So other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you don't mind, please subscribe to my channel and like this and drop a like on this video. And if you have any suggestions on what openings I should cover next or what endgame positions I should cover next, please leave them in the comment section below, because I reply to any of my comments and all of my comments. Other than that, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Like and subscribe, and thank you all for watching, and have a nice day.